Just coming up to 5. Are we quorate now, Jess?
No, not quite yet. We are getting there. Keith, I think we're quorate now for items 6 and 7. We're just not yet quorate for item 9.
Okay, should we make a start? Because I think hopefully people will join later. Okay. So good afternoon. Welcome to, sorry, can I just check we're live, by the way? Is that before I get started?
Yep, we're fully live now and forecasting.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's meeting. I'm Keith Harvey, Vice Chair of the Schools Forum, and I'll be chairing this meeting as Graham Spellman needed to give his apologies. I'm assisted by Jess Bayliss, who's clerk, and Sadie Owen, who's going to be Zoom host of the meeting. Can I start by welcoming David Fitter from St Bart's, who is a new Head Teacher Academy representative, and Chloe Somerville, who is the new Maintain Nursery representative. The other members of the forum are as follows: Paul Davey, Keith Harvey, Julie Lurie, Joe Ligares, Jay Armstrong, Chris Prosser, John Hewitt, Jackie Davies, Trevor Keeble, Michelle Harrison, David Ramsden, Leslie Roberts, Phil Spray, Charlotte Wilson, and we've also got today Ant Sizer and Libby Bucknell, who are deputising, and non-school members, Richard Hand and Jamie Morton. The following councillors and officers from West Berkshire Council are in attendance to advise the meeting. So we've got Heather Codling, portfolio holder for Children and Family Services, Councillor Ian Cottingham, portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate Services, Anne-Marie Dodds, Executive Director for People, Children and Family Services, Neil Goddard, Service Director for Education and Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, Rose Carberry, Principal Advisor for School Improvement, Hester Collicott, DBV Project Manager, Melanie Ellis, Service Lead for Finance, Property and Procurement, and Lisa Potts, Finance Manager, who I believe is arriving a little bit later. Before we start, I'd like to explain that tonight's meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Okay, so we'll move straight ahead with item 1. Jess, apologies.
Yep, so I've received apologies from Graham Spellman, Mark Bennett, Joe MacArthur, with Libby Bucknell substituting, I think is due to join us. Edwin Towell has also given his apologies. So he joined the forum as a new academy rep, but has needed to give his apologies this evening due to a prior engagement. We've also had apologies from Nicola Ponton and Nicole Browning, with Ant Sizer substituting for her.
Thank you. So we'll move straight on to item 2, which is minutes. So could I ask members of the forum if you are willing to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record of the meeting? So I think, do we have someone who was present to propose the minutes? Phil, thank you. And someone to second those minutes? Trevor, thank you. Okay, so I think we put this to the vote through a show of hands, Jess, is that correct? So if you're willing to accept the minutes, if you could just give a show of hands.
Okay, I can confirm they're approved.
Great, thank you. Lovely. Okay, so item 3 is actions from the previous minute. So I believe that all actions have been completed from the previous minutes. So just looking back through, there was an action regarding the Heine's budget in terms of delivering better value. That was scheduled for the meeting for today, so that's all sorted. An item from July regarding the Constitution. Jess, did you want to just say anything on that?
Nothing to add really to that at the moment. It's, yeah, just what's explained there, unless anybody has any further questions.
Okay. Great, thank you. And an item regarding deficit schools, which is going to be brought to the schools forum in December. Okay, fantastic. I think that's everything on that item, which I've now lost my list of where I'm at. Here we go. Right, so item 5 is, item 4 is declaration of interest. So do we have anyone that needs to declare either a pecuniary or a personal interest for this meeting?
Okay, Chair, sorry,
Oh,
is it time to declare interest in number 9?
okay, thank you very much, John.
Thank you. Cheers.
Chris?
Yeah, it's declaring declaration of interest for item 9 as well.
Okay, thank you. And Jackie? I'm assuming also for item 9 that you're on mute. Yeah, I think you're declaring for item 9, aren't you, Jackie? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who has a declaration of interest? Thank you. Right, okay, so item 5 is membership. Over to you, Jess.
Okay, so Edwin Towell, as mentioned, has joined the forum as an academy representative. Just bear with me 2 seconds, sorry. But yeah, sorry, he's had to give his apologies this evening. There are 2 academy governor vacancies and an election was held in September. However, no nominations were received, and I'll rerun that election at a later stage. Chris Prosser is approaching the end of his term of office at the end of October and has confirmed that it will continue for a further term. And finally, Graham Spellman reached the end of his term of office at the end of July and following consultation with the diocese has confirmed that he will continue for a further term.
Great, thank you. Right, I think we have a bit of an issue with some of our item order because my understanding is that Lisa isn't able to join us until 5:30. Oh, sorry, Trevor, you've got a hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Keith. If someone's sending a substitute, does that substitute have a formal vote? I just don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Yes, I can confirm that they do.
Okay.
Right, so yeah, because Lisa isn't able to join us until 5:30, we're going to just change the order slightly today, and we'll move straight to the items for information first of all, which I think starts with delivering better value at item 10. I'm just looking to see if Hester is on screen. I can't actually see her at the moment. Oh, there she is.
I am here.
Thank you. You are in. So Hester, can I hand over to you for the delivering better value update, if that's okay?
Certainly. You've all had the papers circulated previously. We update regularly to Schools Forum. We also update to the DFE every quarter from the start of April 2024 to March 2025, and we have just submitted our second quarter's information to the DFE, which has been accepted. But the information that you hold is the current position on DBV at the moment. As you can see, we are progressing smoothly through the programme. There are issues about delays in recruitment, etc., which does impact on some areas of delivery, namely the mental health programme and the transition support programme. And both those programmes will run beyond March 2025 into the summer and will finish in July when the funding from DBV finishes. So, but we have got permission to extend beyond that time. Would you like me to read through the report? How do you like to proceed with this, Keith, or would you like me to answer questions?
I think answer questions is probably fine. I think the report was there in the paperwork, so I don't think we need to read through. Trevor, shall I go to you?
Yeah, I just actually also ties back to a previous paper which we've skipped. But in paragraph 419, you say a business case will be submitted for additional resources to support a business as usual processing of annual reviews. Now, I'm assuming that ties in with agenda item 8, which is around asking us for some money. What I'm trying to work out is, you're saying business as usual. Isn't this work which the local authority should be doing anyway and shouldn't be needing extra resources for, or have I got that wrong?
Well, it's a statutory obligation to
Yeah.
manage annual reviews at the moment, and obviously local authorities are required to meet those statutory obligations. The monies, so it wouldn't be part of the DBV programme because that's additional and different and transformative. So it is a review of how resourcing is being allocated within to meet the delivery through the statutory assessment team, which Neil will pick up on, but there will be additional input required to meet the increased demand for EHCPs. And I think this is an area which the DBV has highlighted and which is evident in all local authorities. There has been a massive increase in demands for EHCPs, and hence meeting those statutory deadlines will require an expansion and a realignment of services. I think a review of how those are delivered are going to be undertaken over the autumn term, and as a consequence, to actually make sure that we continue to meet the statutory obligations that West Berkshire has around that. Does that answer your question, Trevor? I'm not sure.
Not sure either. I suppose what I'm trying to work out is in paper, sorry, I've got to get to the top to see what it's called. The Transitional Support Programme, Agenda Item 8, it asks for extra money, which I'm assuming is the money which you are asking for in your paper, and for information you're saying this is coming. But this is only for a year. We know, because the Department of Education is telling us that this is increasing all the time.
Yeah.
So a 1 year is purely a stopgap. So
Okay,
I'm just wondering how you're taking that, because it just feels a bit putting a finger
so
in the back.
I understand you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, so the second paper is on for transition support workers. We're delivering a pilot programme, which is part of the DBV, which is funded by DBV, but we only can fund it till July. To make it successful, it needs to run for the full year. So that's why we are asking for additional funding for those posts, which I will go into in the next paper, which I present. But actually, as a pilot program, it will impact, because the purpose of it is to impact on the high needs block, because we will get more successful transition into mainstream. That's the purpose of it, to ensure that children are transferring successfully and we don't get the dropout into specialist placements when it's unnecessary, or independent non-maintained placements, which is putting the pressure on the high needs block. So it's actually meeting needs and demands earlier and building confidence in the system. And that's the purpose of it.
Yeah, I totally buy into that. So, I really do. What I'm just trying to work out is, are you telling us, and this is a yes, no, your boss looking over your shoulder, it may be an unfair question, but you telling us in effect, you don't have the money to provide what legally you should be providing, e.g. reviews, and you have to come for us for more. No,
the annual review business case is an internal mechanism within West Berkshire. That's what we're saying. It's all about the restructure of the assessment team and how we're handling annual reviews, looking at our processes. That's arisen out of the DBV programme, because we've had an opportunity with extra funding to start unpicking our processes and addressing the systems behind it to make a sustainable model moving forward. So the business case will come via Neil, and through that process, it's not additional funding from DBV. It's a separate process. What we've highlighted is this is an area that needs to be addressed because of the high numbers that are coming through and the increased pressure through the demand for EHC assessments.
So I'm going to come back just once more and then I'll stop.
Okay.
But it says to support the transition of identified pupils, which surely that's the new money, right? So this is to do the actual review, and then The money
There are
you're
two-
asking for, is that to help you
There
do
are
that?
2 posts which we are asking for support, which is the transition support programme. We're asking for match funding from Schools Forum. The 3rd post about annual reviews is held within the DBV, and that's a very short phase to ensure that the pilot works successfully. So we'll be focusing on the annual reviews for years 5, year 6s. But in the meantime, irrespective of DBV, there is a review of the statutory assessment processes to ensure that we're meeting our statutory requirements around annual reviews and around assessments within a timely fashion. And so there are 3 different agendas going on there, Trevor, which I think where the confusion is.
Local confusion. Thank you.
Apologies.
That's helpful.
Great, thank you very much. Neil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm what Hester was saying there. So there is the annual review process for which we have been under-resourced to engage in the way we would like to. And we have recently got budget capacity to put an interim role within there to allow us to start catching up on our input to annual reviews. And there is a bid going through the internal corporate processes, as Hester described, for additional council money to make that a permanent post going forward. So Trevor's right. It is absolutely a statutory responsibility, and one that we are falling behind on in a way we would not wish to. We are doing the bare minimum, but need to do more. And so that's why we're looking for investment in that. And that's through DBV what's been identified as an issue. The transition issue is very separate to that, but linked in terms of the resource that goes into it. So just to reassure, we understand our statutory role in relation to annual reviews, and we are looking to put some investment into that to make sure that it reaches the level that we'd wish it to. So hopefully that's clarity on that issue.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Does anyone else have any comments on the Delivering Better Value programme? Obviously, we do have a further update on that later with the item 8, I think it is. Okay, so we move to the safety valve programme. And Hester, that's you again.
Yes, indeed. So I have been tasked with reporting on safety valve programme nationally to Schools Forum in relation to West Berkshire in particular, and a risk that whether West Berkshire moves onto that programme. Since the change in government, there hasn't been any notification regarding safety valve, and it still exists. But the way local authorities are invited onto it is still unclear, and whether this continues on is still unclear. So safety valve exists, local authorities are part of it, but whether it goes on for another 12 months, another 18 months, we haven't had confirmation around that. And at the moment, we're very much in the Delivering Better Value programme, not the safety valve programme, and we're building our momentum on that. So the paper was suggesting that when there is information about any changes around safety valve, we would bring that to Schools Forum. Otherwise, it seems unnecessary to come to you unless you require it for a regular update, because not much has changed so far.
Right, that makes sense to me. Does anyone have any questions on that? Trevor, I'm assuming that's a legacy hand that's up still at the moment.
Here's apologies.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments on safety valve? No, I didn't think that would be the case. So we'll move on to item 12. As we get to, I think, 2 more sort of order for information items, and then we'll sort of move back up the agenda. So DSG, oh no, we can't, that's Lisa on that, isn't it? So in which case we'll go back to item 6, I think, at that point, where I will hand over to Melanie to introduce the item on the schools consultation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so this paper is to approve the consultation to go out to all schools on the schools funding formula for 25-26, and the planned dates for that is that it will go out on the 16th of October and finish on the 6th of November. The major issue with this report is that we don't actually have the financial information from the Department for Education yet. Usually we get provisional information in July and are able to model that and put forward various tables in the report that give schools an indication of where the funding will be, but we haven't got any of that at all, and we're not likely to get anything until after the 30th of October, which means that it's quite late for running a consultation, and I think we'll run out of meetings to discuss it. So the proposal here is to go out and consult on the general principles that we have done over the past few years anyway. Fortunately, we're really close to the national funding formula anyway, so there's nothing usually too controversial, but we're going to consult, or the plan is, on the usual questions that we have in there, and they're set out in section 10. So that's just whether we should mirror the formula, whether we should, how we should adjust any funding, what percentage people may or may not want to transfer, and then the criteria for the additional funds, which again haven't changed. There are some numbers in there that need updating when we get the final information, but the theme hasn't changed. And then also about the de-delegated services, which is in the next report. So just to add to that, if anything different comes out of the government announcement when it comes, we will obviously have to go out and do probably just a follow-up consultation by email, but without running a set of meetings on it. But until we see that, we won't know what it will be. But every indication at the moment doesn't suggest there'll be anything unusual. So if there's any questions on that, that's fine. If not, I think we have to do a vote to say whether we're going ahead with the consultation. Although I think, Keith, you had a suggestion on that as well.
Yes, well, let's see first of all if there's any questions about the consultation first. Trevor.
Yeah, sorry, I seem to be talking a lot here. Just to clarify on point 515, you're saying we'll be able to transfer 0.5% for our total schools block, and if you don't, you will actually appeal it. That's how I must submit a disapplication request for Secretary of State. So are you saying, is that what you're saying? You're saying that if we don't approve this, you will appeal it anyway?
No, it's not saying that. It's saying that we could appeal it. There's certainly no foregone conclusion or decision on that, but that's just pointing out that option is available to the local authority.
Okay, thank you. And then the second point is on number 3. You're saying this actually has no impact. By removing monies from schools, in effect, it does have an impact, and it has an equality impact. So I don't quite understand why you put no impact. I mean, it's no impact probably to the local authority, but for the money which is not coming into the schools, that is an impact, and that's a negative impact.
Yes, but I think the reason, because I think we've been asked this question before and we've looked at it, and because the impact is the same across all schools, the point of the equalities impact is to say if it affects a certain group of characteristics in one way more than another, and we believe from going through the EIA that it doesn't impact a particular group.
Can I formally disagree with that, or is that not allowed? I don't know how that works, Keith.
Okay, so I mean, which bit do you specifically disagree with there, Trevor?
It says that by removing this money, there will be no impact. And clearly, by removing it from the schools, there will be an impact, because that's money which the schools would have spent.
Okay. I don't know, Melanie, if there's any need for coming back there, or if we need to change the consultation.
I will just consult again with Jess and with our experts on the equalities impact assessment, just to make completely sure that that's okay. And if not, then we will do the full assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ren. Sorry, final point. Can you just explain where that extra monies will be moved to? Because it's, I imagine that's into 9.1. And it says, so it's growth funding or funding for high need blocks to allocate to schools. Is that correct?
No, that's not. So if a block transfer is approved, what it would do is it would move up to 0.5% of the school's funding into the block of the school's forum's choice, which has always historically been to the high needs block.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on that part of item 6? Neil.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come on that last point, I just wanted to reassure colleagues again about the 0.5% transfer or any transfer that is agreed. By moving from schools block to high needs block, which, as Melanie says, is the most likely outcome, clearly the high needs block is distributed to schools through a more targeted route around high needs block, around EHCPs and those sorts of things. So the money stays within that amount, the quantum that goes to schools. It just goes to schools in a different way through the high needs block rather than through the schools block. So just to reassure, it still sits within that broader envelope of funding that is available to schools, and it's a similar issue. And I'll probably say the same thing again when we get onto the clawback issue, just to assure it's not moved out of the cost that we incur. It funds pupils, actual pupils with identified needs through the high needs block in the same way the rest of the high needs block does.
So how can we be assured that it won't go towards a deficit?
Can I come back on that, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the high needs block is in deficit and will continue to be in deficit, and we are not unusual in amongst many local authorities that are in that position. So by transferring from the schools block to the high needs block, we reduce the deficit. But what that does, all of that money still goes to those pupils through the high needs block distribution. It just means the rolled up deficit that we take into future years is reduced by that amount, but the money itself still goes out through various routes to schools to meet EHCPs and those other things that we fund through the high needs block. It is 0.5% is not equal to or more than the deficit that's likely to occur, though, which is I think the point we're making.
Thank you. And of course, it's a consultation, so it's for schools themselves to give their views on that anyway, I think. Leslie.
It's just an observation in that people who weren't there last year, I was just looking to see if Joe was on there. So this meeting was my first experience of Schools Forum last year, and it goes out to consultation. The difficulty last year was that when it came to Schools Forum, it had changed what was being proposed, and the first we knew about it was through Schools Forum, and then it was also not agreed what the schools wanted when consulted, and a halfway mark was made. So it's just an observation that we do this for consultation, but experience tells us that that doesn't always mean that the reps will have a vote on this, or they will vote, but it won't matter.
So my understanding, Leslie, and maybe Neil might come back on this potentially, is that, or Melanie, is that the consultation is to get people's views, but it's the Schools Forum that takes the decision in the end, and it may not be in line necessarily with those views. Is that fair to say?
Because they changed, it was changed on the agenda. It was the first that we knew about it last year. So I think all the schools voted 0, and when it came to the Schools Forum, the first we knew about it was on the agenda, and it was 0.5, and then people voted for a mid-range of 0.25, even though the consultation was 0.
Neil, Melanie, have you got anything to come back on that?
It's just what happened. I think there's probably no comment, but it's just for those people who weren't here last year, that's what sometimes happens.
Thank you. Neil?
So not having been here last year, I can't comment on the previous process, but in terms of going forward, absolutely, we consult with the purpose of understanding schools' views, but the recommendations from the local authority were informed by that, but not limited by that. And so we may take a different view. The Schools Forum will have access to both the views of the schools expressed through the consultation and the views of the local authority, and takes a decision on its own behalf with that in mind. And in relation to the transfer, the Schools Forum is a decision-making body, so you can make that decision. And as we go right back to that first question that was asked, if the local authority disagrees with that, the only recourse then is to the Secretary of State to ask them to overturn a decision of the Schools Forum, which remains an option. But that is true of any decision of the Schools Forum if we feel it's not in the best interest of the system as a whole. So that's the position that we go into. So the forum, when it makes the decision, will have the consultation responses and the local authority's view, and then makes its own view. Sorry, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, just to build on Leslie's point, what happened last year was that the consultation said 0, and then the authority came back and said they were going to make a disapplication request. And what we came to then was a compromise of 2.25 to stop that disapplication request being made. And that disapplication sentence within that consultation document, I think that's the first time it's been in there. So I know Trevor picked it up. I don't remember that being in there before. Yeah, just as an observation.
No, I don't think that's been in there previously. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I did think it was in there last year, but yeah, maybe not, and maybe it wasn't perhaps so prominent. But yeah, it's in there now because obviously we have had that discussion on it, and it's exactly as Chris said. Yeah, that the decision was made on the 0, and then there was a negotiation afterwards.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no more comments on item 6, before we make a decision on a vote, it probably makes sense to also look at item 7, which is, then we can hopefully take a vote on the whole thing together, which is the delegations consultation. So Lisa, I think that's you if I hand over to you.
Sorry, Keith, there's a hand up as well.
Sorry, David.
Oh.
Yes, just wanted to clarify, I'm just a bit confused that if money is transferred across to the High Needs block and is going to reduce the deficit, I'm not quite sure how that can also be used to support students who need that money in schools. I may have missed something, but I'd have thought it was either going to be used to support students or it was going to be used to reduce the deficit, but I can't see how it can do both.
Neil, do you want to come back on that?
I'm happy to. And there is an element of perception here, David, so I do understand where you're coming from. I think the view of the local authority would be that in doing the transfer, you would use the money that has been transferred, because that's money available to us first, and then if the expenditure went beyond with that, you would then go into deficit. And so the money is being used to support the children because that's the first call, and deficit is the last call because obviously we don't want to be in deficit, but that is the position. And as I said when the first question was asked, I understand when the deficit is projected to be bigger than the whole surplus transfer, I'm terribly sorry, that can appear a strange way of managing budgets. But like I say, I think that's how we have to think about it, is we increase the High Needs block for next year by doing the transfer. We spend all of that, and then if we have to, we move into deficit beyond that, and that would roll up with the historic deficits that are carried forward as well. But I do understand that is like as I say, there's a certain perception to that. And I understand your question entirely, David.
Thank you. Okay, should we move on to item 7? Lisa, shall I hand over to you to introduce that?
Yes, thank you. So this is a report outlining the delegations for 25-26, which include the Therapeutic Thinking Service, the Ethnic Minority and Traveller Achievement Service, the Trade Union, CLEAP, School Improvement, Statutory Responsibilities, and also the Health and Safety. So what we've done is we've calculated the cost of what those services are going to be for next year. And at the moment in Appendix A, there is an outline based on a per pupil value based on October 23 census. So although we haven't yet got the October 24 census, the final figures will be based on that per school. But what won't change is the actual total that we've put forward for the cost of the services. There's not any major changes from last year. The services we're delegating are all the same as previous, and it's a report that we look at every year in consultation with the consultation we're just talking about.
Thank you. And obviously this is not making a decision on these de-delegations at the moment, it's just making a decision on whether we go to consultation on the de-delegations. So yeah. On these particular de-delegations. So it doesn't feel particularly controversial to me, but is there any comment or from anyone? No, doesn't look like it. In that case, can I propose then that we recommend that the consultation be undertaken with all schools on basically numbers, I've got 1 to 4 on my sheet here. West Berkshire Council proposed school funding formula for 25-26 and up to 0.5% transfer for the schools block to other funding blocks. The criteria is to be used to allocate additional funds and the proposed services to be de-delegated. Is there someone who would like to propose that that's taken to a vote? Oh, yeah, Michelle, thank you. And a seconder? Paul, thank you. Shall I hand over to you for the vote, Jess?
Yeah, so this is a vote with all forum members. If you can indicate if you are for or against the proposal. So Libby Bucknell. Oh, Libby Bucknell.
Libby, I think you have to physically say for, sorry, or against.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. Okay, Jackie Davies.
For.
Paul Davey.
For.
David Fitter.
For.
Richard Hand.
For.
Keith Harvey.
For.
Michelle Harrison. Michelle Harrison.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. Okay, John Hewitt. John Hewitt. Okay, I'll move on for a moment. Trevor Keeble.
For.
Joe Lagaris.
For.
Julie Lurie. Julie Lurie. Okay, I'll move on. Jamie Morton. I'm not sure if he's joined us yet. Okay, Chris Prosser.
For.
Leslie Roberts.
For.
Phil Spray.
For.
Chloe Somerville.
For.
And Charlotte Wilson.
For.
Yeah, I can confirm that's carried.
Great, thank you very much. In which case, I think we can now move on to item 8, which is the transition support programme that was alluded to earlier. So again, I think that's Hester.
Hello, yes. So this is a proposal for match funding for 2 posts to enable targeted support for Year 6 pupils as they move through the spring and summer term and transition into the autumn term. It's a full year's programme which has been worked on with co-produced with schools through DBV work streams. And as I say, we are requesting a shared funding of these posts because the DBV funding finishes in July, and for having proper impact we are suggesting that this programme needs to run beyond July, and we are asking for schools to consider this pilot project.
Thank you. And I think in talking to Neil earlier, am I right in thinking, Neil, that whilst the Schools Forum can take a view on this, it is the local authority's decision in the end, is that correct?
This is about, thank you, Chair, yes. So this is about the allocation of high needs block resource for the continuation of the project as Hester has set out. And we would want that to be a joint decision with the Schools Forum. But yes, in the end, we are asking as a consultee rather than a decision-making body.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any comments on that? I can see Trevor, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to I don't really understand, because you put in 6.2 cost to the school forum. So when you say cost to a school forum, you're not actually, we don't actually have a fund which we can pay for this.
No,
the money comes from somewhere else.
Yes, it's to highlight that the decision is in consultation with Schools Forum, and it's not only part funded by DBV.
So where would the rest of the money come from?
It's a high needs block allocation, and as Neil's expressed, it can be decided by the local authority, but it's in consultation with Schools Forum about that allocation of funding.
So does money get removed from schools further down the line, or is it added to the deficit. So I'm just trying to understand where this money comes
It
from.
would be eventually added to the deficit. But Neil, would you confirm that, please?
Yeah, I mean, this is a project where what we're suggesting is that by investing this money from the high needs block in this way, over time, the call on the high needs block would reduce because transitions would be effectively managed. We'd intervene more appropriately and early, and costs would not escalate. So this is an investment with the view that there will be a payoff over time to reduce the future pressure on the high needs block.
Thank you, Neil. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, and part of my question's been asked by Trevor. I wasn't clear as to where the money was going to be coming from to match fund. My only concern is linked to the historically when we've created posts with the invest to save money. We've not really seen any sort of impact of those posts, and I just worry that this is a bit of an unknown. We're not really sure if it's going to work, and yet we're creating more posts to make it work, and that's my only concern.
The only thing I would say on that, Chris, as well, is that I guess this is through research from Newton. Is that right? I think so. Potentially, actually, does have some basis in. Hopefully, I don't know. Hester, do you want to come back on that?
I mean, I would just highlight that when children get their first EHC plans, it's often at points of transition, and then we lose quite a high percentage into specialist placements, either maintained special schools or independent non-maintained. What we're trying to do, irrespective of whether the child gets an EHCP or not, at that very late point, maybe in year 6 or the end of year 5, they are supported successfully into mainstream, because a lot of the analysis and the consultation that went along with parents and schools at that point last year around this particular area and transition, it was highlighted there is great anxiety and a lack of confidence in the system. So we want to address that for targeting individuals. So we've highlighted very specifically a number of children who we have identified as particularly vulnerable. If we can be successful with this, we will save a significant amount on the high needs block. We will be targeting resources, and the outcomes for these children are much better if they're maintained within their schools with the appropriate access to provision at an earlier stage than them falling out of the system, either moving into maintained special or independent non-maintained as they proceed through their secondary education, which often may happen at year 8 or year 9 as well. So it very much the evidence very much indicates that this will be successful, but we will evaluate it in July. And you know, we can start to see the impact around that, and we could feed back to Schools Forum in July for an update around that.
Thank you, Chris. Did you want to come back on that at all?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Neil, was your hand to do with that before I asked Jackie?
It was, if that's okay, Chair. Firstly, I wanted to agree with Chris's challenge, because we often talk about spending money with future expectations of reducing pressure. And I know Forum have raised that previously about other projects that we've undertaken, and that is something through DBV we really want to be looking into. So there is a focus on that, and something we do want to bring back to Schools Forum, because I know it's something that Forum have been interested in previously. In relation to this particular project, I think the key thing here is, yes, there is evidence based to why you would do this, and that it would lead to longer term savings, but also it's worth noting that the high needs block is only picking up half the cost, because the other half is coming from DBV, and so therefore we would suggest it's a good value investment from the high needs block, because we're able to lever DBV funding to match it, to create, as Hester said at the start, a longer term piece of work that we think will have greater value and lead to us being able to assess the impact. So absolutely take Chris's point, and we should continue to focus on the payback of those things where we are investing. But in this particular instance, like I said, I do think there is an evidence base that would support, and it's good value for money given the DBV investment we're able to leverage.
Thank you. Jackie.
Just a couple of questions, really. Firstly, are they term time only posts? Is the first question, and secondly, is do the staffing costs include on costs?
Hester.
Yes, they include on costs. Yes, they are term time only posts.
Okay, thank you. I think next hand is Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question. My understanding, and please forgive me if I've got this wrong, is that the DBV funding will end in a year's time, or less than a year's time. Does that then mean that the whole cost of this will then move on to the high needs block?
I think we would have to evaluate the impact of this. If it's a pilot program, if it can be shown that it's successful, we successfully transfer a number of children who otherwise would have ended up in a specialist provision unnecessarily. And I'm not saying that all children should be in mainstream. What I'm saying is it's the unnecessary loss into specialist, independent, non-maintained, etc. I think there would be a strong case for a review at Schools Forum about maintaining this programme moving forward. And that would be the proposal, because this is a pilot at the moment.
Okay, I think you just said yes.
Yeah. The evidence would speak for itself coming back to Schools Forum.
Thank you.
Neil, is that a legacy hand you put up there?
It is, Chair.
That's okay. Leslie.
If it does work, then it would be good to see early help earlier rather than leaving it to this part. So I'm just thinking of the children we meet that come from other schools fall into this, but generally we see that pathway before this point. I don't know if it's cheaper when they're younger, but they're definitely more malleable.
I think there will be an opportunity to expand and consider how the programme may be developed moving forward. This is a very specific area that we can evaluate easily and see immediate impact on, and but if we can move forward on that and we've got evidence around that, that would be an opportunity for year 2, I think.
Thank you. Heather.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just want to emphasise that actually what we're looking at here is the best outcomes for the young people.
Absolutely.
And not just the financial. Yes, the finances are important. We've got to get it right, but it's the outcomes for the young people that I am mostly concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, I think we all are though, Heather, aren't we? It's just we have to question.
I hope so.
Well, we have to question the posts and how it's going to be used. But I think everyone's driver is the young people.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in that case, shall we put this to the vote? So the recommendation is that request for match funding 2 transition support programme posts that have been identified as necessary for the sustained delivery of the pilot initiative 1 year. Do we have someone to propose that? So did someone put that? I didn't miss if someone put their hand up there. Struggling to see anyone proposing it. I am happy to propose it as chair, if that's okay. Do we have a seconder?
No.
Trevor. Okay, so should we move to the vote, Jess?
Yeah, so this is a vote with all forum members again. Libby Bucknell.
Yeah.
Jackie Davies.
4.
Paul Davey.
4.
David Vitter.
4.
Richard Hand.
4.
Keith Harvey.
4.
Michelle Harrison.
4.
John Hewitt.
4.
Trevor Keeble.
4.
Joe Lagaris.
4.
Julie Lurie.
Julie did say 4 then. It's just that she's very quiet. We can't hear her.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, Chris Prosser.
4.
Leslie Roberts.
4.
Ant Sizer.
4.
Phil Spray.
4.
Chloe Somerville.
4.
And Charlotte Wilson.
4.
And confirm that's carried.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Okay, we move on then to item 9 next, which is the clawback of surplus balances update. We've had some people who have declared an interest in this item, and I think I'm right in saying, Jess, that we have to ask them to declare the reason for their interest and then to withdraw. Is that correct?
Well, they've declared their interest at the
They declare
beginning.
their interest, so-
Yeah, so it's just this time they can just leave the meeting, and then the advice would be then they can return once it's concluded.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if those people that are able to leave at this point. Jess, are you able to confirm they've all left?
Yeah, they look to have all left.
Okay, so I will hand over to Neil for this item.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper you've got in front of you is an update from the discussion and decision making that was made at the last schools forum. I'm not going to go through the whole history of this process. Hopefully that's set out in the report, and colleagues will have been aware of the schools. What I will say is that following on from the process that led to the schools forum last time, the council listened very carefully to the concerns that were raised by schools about the process that was implemented, and on that basis decided to undertake a review of all of the surpluses that had been identified as uncommitted and thus subject to clawback, then the clawback mechanism that the schools forum had agreed. So that was undertaken. It was undertaken over the summer, but the finish point was the 11th of September. So there was time post the summer holidays to engage. I visited many of the schools directly impacted, along with Councillor Codling and the leader of the council. And I think we had helpful and constructive conversations at every school about the circumstances that had led to the situation, the underlying issues, and the reasons why the surplus had accrued, and what their intentions were for spending that. So that was a really helpful exercise, and that led to each of the schools having the opportunity to provide us with further information, hopefully being better informed about what it is we were looking for and those criteria that we would apply, and for that to then be reviewed. That information was reviewed by a panel that was headed by the head of internal audit. I was on the panel, and so was Melanie. And so there was a good oversight of the schools with a view of the proposals that were put forward through the additional information that was presented. In doing that, it became clear that there were elements of those surpluses that should be counted as committed that hadn't been through the first part of this process. And there are many reasons for that. In the main, they relate to capital expenditure, and the reason it wasn't identified originally was either that the capital expenditure had been delayed or been driven by recent events, or not recorded in a discrete way in what had been provided in the first instance. And so through conversation, we're able to get to a much more accurate assessment of the surplus balances. So that's what we did. We then applied the policy that the schools forum have already agreed to the remaining surplus balances, and that comes to the outcome which is before you in the report, which is a clawback of somewhat over 1.5 million, and that impacting only on 2 schools. That is quite a significant change from the previous paper, but I think is now a much better informed position than we had previously, and is hopefully something that the schools that are impacted by this at least understand the process that's been undertaken, although they may not have a different view on terms of some of the decisions that we made as a panel. So what we're recommending to you is that you as schools forum agree to the clawing back from those 2 schools of the amount set out in the report. I want it to be really clear about what the decision the schools forum can make is, because I think we unhelpfully perhaps muddied that at the last round of conversation. So at the last schools forum and the heads funding group, we had a conversation about what those balances contained, and actually that's not a role for schools forum or heads funding group. the accounting practice is the accounting practice, and that should lead to a committed or uncommitted balance. And that's a piece of work to be undertaken between the local authority and the school themselves. And that's now what we've done. So the decision the Schools Forum can make, and the one that's before you, is having undertaken that and hopefully giving you the confidence that we have been through this now in as much detail as we possibly could and applied the policy as you agreed it, whether to claw back or not. And that is the decision that the Schools Forum can make. And as we've said previously, this is a decision which the Schools Forum itself holds. And if the local authority wanted to appeal that, the route would then be through the Secretary of State for a review at that level. But clearly, given how late we are now in the financial year, we'd have to think carefully about whether that was appropriate things or helpful going forward. So what I'm saying to you, I believe, is that we've now robustly applied the policy as is written. We've given all the schools impacted as much opportunity as we can to influence the outcome of that, so that it's as accurate as it possibly can be. And I would now recommend to you that we do proceed with the clawback as per the figures that are set out in the report. And we will make sure that that then happens as quickly after Schools Forum as is possible. As a reminder, any clawback goes into the high needs block. And so the conversation we had earlier, as the chair helpfully pointed out, would be similar to the transfer. That money would go into the high needs block and mean that we didn't have to move into the overdraft or the deficit as quickly as otherwise we would. And so the money does absolutely go back out to schools through a different route in a more targeted way to support high needs. So the recommendation is that you approve the clawback as set out in the report. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think that following the last meeting, I think obviously it's been a painful process, I think, but it does feel like the right thing perhaps is being done now and the right approach. But does anyone have any questions or comments? Trevor.
Yeah, I just think I thank you, Neil, for that report, and it's really helpful you've gone through the process now. What really worries me is the process wasn't done for the first report. We had a report given to the Schools Forum which was actually wrong. You know, I've spoken to some of the schools involved and there's some still very high feelings about this. And I just want to say, you know, going forward, we need to have confidence in the local authority that reports which the School Forum gets are correct and, you know, are legally correct. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. And it was very disappointing that that wasn't the case. And I just want to formally say that. Thank you.
Chair, if I can comment. So, Trevor, thank you for your comments. And I think clearly we would not want to be presenting anything at Schools Forum that is anything other than accurate. I think there was an ambition when this was first undertaken to get the process done before the end of the academic year. And that led to an insufficient amount of rigour in the review process. And, you know, as a local authority, we can say, in retrospect, that was an error, and we have, you know, taken action, I hope, that addresses that and recognises that, and statements that the leaders made in council and others recognised that we do need to make sure this is right, and that is what I believe we have done now. But thank you for your comments, and I don't disagree with your sentiment.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I think that we must always be mindful of the fact that lots of authorities have been in this position, and it's as a result of serious underfunding under the previous government. You know, so let's not lose sight of that. That's why so many authorities are in this position in the first place.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Does anyone else have any comments, questions? In that case, if I can find where I've actually put it here. So we need to move to a vote now. So the recommendation is that the Schools Forum considers the process and outcomes of the review and approves the clawbacks as per the local authority's revised proposals. So do we have a proposer for that? Phil, thank you. And a seconder? Paul, thank you. Jess, we can move to the vote, I think.
Yeah, so this is a vote with maintained school representatives only. So Libby Bucknell,
4.
Paul Davey,
4.
Keith Harvey,
4.
Michelle Harrison,
4.
Joe Lagaris,
4.
Leslie Roberts,
4.
Ant Sizer,
Against.
Phil Spray,
4.
Chloe Somerville.
4.
I can confirm that that is approved.
Thank you. Do we need to invite the other people back in now at this point?
Yes, so I believe Sadie's dropping them an email just to let them know they can come back in now.
Yeah, that's just been sent.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we now move on to, if I'm working through my thing correctly, item 12, I think, which is the DSG monitoring, which I believe is Lisa. I haven't missed out any other items, have I, Jess? No.
No.
Lisa.
Yes, thank you. This is the Q2 report for the budget monitoring for the DSG. So we have, obviously we can have a brought forward from previous years of the 9.45 million, which has been talked about at length previously. What we're seeing now at Q2 is that the in-year deficit is just under £8 million, which is largely due to the deficit that we've got in year from the high needs block. So if that forecast comes to the end of the year, we're looking at £17.5 million over. We have got a couple of areas where we've got some savings. So the early years block at the moment is still quite, it's got a lot of new funding streams coming on board with more entitlements for children over 9 months. So a lot of those figures are quite difficult to calculate, but we have got a saving on one of our more senior posts in there at the moment. So we've reported that as a saving. There are a couple of areas in the Central School Services block which are overspending, which is mainly due to some charges for the capita system that were higher than we expected. We did put a estimate in there for an uplift, but the uplift that actually came through was higher than expected. So that's why we've got a 21k overspend on that section. Obviously, the high needs block is now, we've now sent out 2 terms worth of top-up funding for the maintained and the special schools. So we have got a bit more of an idea about what the forecasts are likely to be for that area. So at the moment, we've got 119,000 overspend. And obviously a lot of those ongoing pressures are due to the increase in the number of children that are requiring an assessment for an EHCP. There is a table in 5.12, which just highlights what the position will be at the end of the year for each of the individual blocks. We do still have some underspends in the schools block area, which helping to support and bring that deficit down slightly. If that wasn't there, obviously it would be around £1 million more. There is a breakdown by cost centre in the appendix at the end. And just to make a note that because we hadn't had the decision around the clawback official until this meeting, those figures do not include any of that. So we would expect to put that clawback adjustment in for the next forecast at Q3.
Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone have any comments about that? No? Okay, in which case move on to item 13, which is forward plans. Really, this is just to ask everyone to note the forward plan and contracts forward plan. Anything else that needs to be mentioned there, or anyone questions about that? In which case I move on to item 14, the date and format of the next meeting. So the next meeting is Monday, the 2nd of December, 2024. I'm assuming we're going to be discussing particularly the outcomes of the consultations then, and hopefully we'll have some information about funding then as well. So it's a question of whether people have a preference for that meeting to be held in person or virtually. I know personally I find it much easier to hold it virtually too, so I can actually make the meetings. I don't know what other people feel.
I personally prefer it face to face, but I do understand that that is difficult, especially the size of West Berkshire.
I would agree. I think virtually is easier.
for attendance.
Jackie, sorry.
Well, I prefer face-to-face really, but I think virtual is less time consuming. It takes a lot of time out of people's day getting to these meetings. So I'd go for virtual.
I propose that we have it virtually then for the next meeting. And I think that then finishes the meeting. So thank you, everyone. Concludes the business of the meeting. Can I ask you to